Questions to consider. Stereotypes and prejudices. Why do we have them? Are stereotypes always bad? No, they are not always bad. They help us to quickly assess a new situation based off ones we've had before. On the other hand, stereotypes bring out the us and them mentality, which eliminates individual differences. At times, this leads to attaching a bad stigma to a group of people, which is called a prejudice. Positive stereotypes aren't always good either, because we overweigh the person and assume they have certain positive traits that they may not actually have. For example, in Blind Rage, Georgina Cleage states that people overweighed Helen Keller with an innocent and superhuman stereotype. It wasn't to discredit Helen Keller, but it was to make people question the stereotype.
This is Georgina Cleage, and I'm going to try to describe her in 5 words. Writer, art expert, tall, former Martha Graham ballet dancer, my fellow English professor and disability studies minor co-chair.
I think we should start over.
A writer, an arts lover, a teacher, a disability studies scholar, and tall.
In Georgina's English class, she asked her students, do books about disabled people overcoming their disability give a helpful insight to the outside world or make them seem like superhuman in their achievements? That's definitely a question that's something to think about. In the book Blind Rage, she explains that our world isn't accommodating enough for people with disabilities. In William Styron's A Tidewater Morning, there were a variety of stereotypes. The obvious one was racism. Some of the characters used the word niggers. Paul's mother didn't want their housekeeper Florence to watch him, mostly because she was black. The storekeeper, Mr. Quigley, treated his black worker harshly. Another stereotype was when the father would tell the mother she was a northerner, and since she had an education, she was supposed to be open-minded and accepting of everyone. This is an example of the problem I spoke about earlier of overweighing. Another stereotype is the Dabneys, who are the stereotypical southern white trash folks who illegally make moonshine. This book also demonstrates, specifically in the Shadrach story, that children are taught to stereotype. Paul and the Dabney boys weren't discriminatory when they first found Shadrach. They were only concerned for his health. Another example of this is when Paul is saying how Florence, the housekeeper, was his main motherly figure. However, early on in the book, he talks about making racist comments in the car and his parents getting upset with him. He later acknowledges he had just read about it in the media. This just goes to show that kids learn discrimination. They aren't born knowing it. The concept of children being more accepting than adults occurs in Running with Scissors also. People with mental illness have always had stigmas attached to them. Even though Augustine was skeptical when he first was acquainted with the Finches, he grew up mostly accepting people with mental illness since he was immersed in it, residing at the institution. His mother, however, was another story for him. At one point, Augustine and his sister Natalie went to a mental institution and performed for the patients, not thinking twice about it. They were not discriminatory. Recently, there has been controversy over the DSM because it dehumanizes people. The director of the Western Massachusetts Recovery Learning Community said in an article, "On a regular basis through my work, people introduce themselves as a psychiatric diagnosis, sometimes before even saying their name. Yes, it is true that many find relief in their diagnosis, but what about when relief becomes identity and resignation? Society needs to become more accepting of mental illness and not make it someone's only trait." In Zammy, a new spelling of my name, there were multiple stigmatizing stereotypes. This is when someone has different stigmas attached to them and they may conflict each other. This is also sometimes called double jeopardy. Because Audre Lorde was legally blind, black, and a lesbian, she frequently felt that she couldn't totally identify with a certain group of people. The stereotype that is different from others is disability, because people who don't have a disability base their stereotypes on lack of experience and misinformation. Family support is also something that varies within the stereotypes. Religious and ethnic minorities are usually shared by the whole family, while disabilities and sexual orientations are not usually shared. This leads to the individual's search outside the family for connections. Audrey's family only sympathized with the racial discrimination they all received, even though sympathy isn't exactly the right word choice. Her mother didn't give her sympathy, she just tried to toughen her up and taught her not to rely on others or pity herself. In the book Diversity and Visual Impairment, Sammy is said to be one of the first writings to celebrate diversity within stereotypes. In Donald Murray's writing, All Writing is Autobiographical, he talks about how everything we read, we think of it in regards to our own experiences. This just goes to show that it's natural for humans to link new experiences with old ones. In psychology, this is called encoding. However, the problem is we don't always have the experiences or knowledge to sufficiently relate to someone. Therefore, we automatically make assumptions, and they usually don't reflect positively. In Daredevil on Invasive Writing, the author says she likes writing because it forces one to examine their own ideas, attitudes, and identity. This pertains to my argument because all of us, as subjective human beings, should regularly do this. So why are there stereotypes and prejudices? I'm convinced it's simply what we've been taught to do. Whether it's our families or the media teaching us, we don't question them, and that's what we need to do in order for there to be change for the people who deserve equality and aren't receiving it. That's the main message I've gotten from taking this class.